In a world where silence often masks suffering, tonight we break that silence. Amnesty International has sent shockwaves through the global community with a report accusing Israel of committing the crime of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, a grave allegation that Israel has consistently denied. How do such accusations resonate globally? And most importantly, how can the world support Gaza's civilians amid escalating tensions? Stay with us for a thought-provoking discussion with Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Al-Ahram Online has reported on an Israeli airstrike on a mosque turned shelter in Deir al-Balah, Gaza, killing 21 Palestinians, including children, with horrific injuries reported. The attack is part of ongoing Israeli military operations across Gaza, which has caused over 42,000 deaths, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Israel claims to target Hamas militants embedded in civilian areas, but has provided no evidence. Amid widespread destruction, healthcare systems are overwhelmed, facing shortages of critical supplies. Residents described relentless bombardments, with homes destroyed and families devastated. All the while, Israel urges evacuations to a so-called humanitarian zone in southern Gaza. And before we continue, let's take a closer look at the Amnesty International report accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
In a groundbreaking report released today, Amnesty International has accused Israel for committing and continuing to commit acts of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The report, titled "It Feels Like You're Not Human: Israel's Genocide Against Palestinians in Gaza," documents Israel's systematic destruction and dehumanization of Gaza's population under military operations.
The State of Israel has committed and is continuing to commit genocide against Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip.
These actions include mass killings, severe physical and psychological harm, and the imposition of living conditions aimed at physical destruction, all while enjoying near total impunity. The findings are backed by 6 months of research, analyzing over 100 statements from Israeli officials and the devastating aftermath of military attacks on Gaza. According to Amnesty, these actions unequivocally fulfill the criteria outlined in the 1948 Genocide Convention.
That is more than a year ago. The Palestinians of Gaza have been held in a nightmare day after day. Utter carnage has unfolded in front of the very eyes of the world, and there is no end in sight.
The report serves as a stark reminder of the urgent need for accountability and a call to prioritize the protection of Palestinian lives. Will the global powers finally act, or will this chilling warning go unheeded? The answer may determine the course of justice in Gaza.
During its emergency session on Gaza, the United Nations General Assembly heard Palestinians' UN representative Riyad Mansour delivered a strong condemnation of what he described as Israel's ongoing genocide. Mansour also criticized attacks on UN institutions and violations of international law, calling for an immediate ceasefire and an end to what he termed massacres. He urged the enforcement of International Court of Justice rulings, emphasizing the need for Palestinian self-determination and the establishment of a sovereign state based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. He concluded by underlining the urgency of ending decades of occupation and apartheid. An Israeli airstrike on Gaza's city's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood has killed 10 Palestinians, injuring others after targeting a house. That comes as Israeli occupation forces detained 28 Palestinians across the West Bank, including children and a wounded individual taken from a hospital. The raids have involved home destructions, assaults, and threats. Israeli occupation forces have bombed a house in Gaza's Nusrayat camp, killing 3 civilians and injuring several others. Strikes also targeted Gaza City, Rafah, and Khan Yunis, while intermittent shelling hit Al Maghazi camp. Rescue crews in the Al Junaina neighborhood recovered 3 bodies amid the destruction. The attacks across central and southern Gaza have left widespread devastation and numerous casualties. Still in the condemnation process, Jordan's King Abdullah II has urged an end to settler violence against Palestinians and the immediate cessation of violations at Jerusalem's holy sites. Earlier in Washington, he called for a Gaza ceasefire, a 2-state solution, and a sufficient humanitarian aid. Meeting U.S. lawmakers, Jordan's king emphasized the need for sustained relief access in Gaza, support for Lebanon's ceasefire, and stability in Syria. Amnesty International has reported that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The organization called for urgent international action, citing evidence from its research that Israel continues these crimes systematically with impunity during its year-long military offensive. The report described Israel's actions as unleashing devastation and horror upon Palestinians. And for more analysis, we are joined from Ramallah by Major General Habis Al-Sharouf, the Director of Palestinian Institute for National Security Studies, and Dr. Mohammed Osman, an International Relations Specialist. A very warm welcome to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you both with us. Dr. Osman, how significant are Amnesty International's accusations against Israel in reshaping its global image?
Well, thank you for having me. Of course, Amnesty International has just reaffirmed what we already know. Amnesty International has decided to, or has concluded, as for more perspective, Amnesty International is one of the world's largest and oldest human rights NGOs, founded back in 1960. So for them to reach the conclusion that Israel has been committing genocide in the Gaza Strip is quite a reinforced condemnation of the Israeli conduct in Gaza. Already there's a genocide case open against Israel in the International Court of Justice on account of them violating the Genocide Convention. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go on.
You hear me? Okay. Yes. The Genocide Convention, and also the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli former Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, which means that the Israeli leaders are implicated in committing crimes that can constitute later on genocide, or it can be concluded as such. So that's from two international courts. So it was about time that other international human rights organizations, especially non-governmental ones, would reach the same conclusion. And I think this will help provide more evidence to condemn Israel and prove their implication in the commission of the crime of genocide.
Dr. Osman, Amnesty International has sent shockwaves through the global community, of course, with this report. What's your narrative, sir, on this?
Well, it seems that, of course, it will send shockwaves because it will anger Israel. Amnesty International has been working on that report for months. They have been subjected to an insurmountable amount of pressure in order not to issue such a report. And this is what I expect and what I know the Israelis usually do before such reports come out. However, Amnesty International did not budge to any of that pressure and issued the report. Of course, they will be criticized, they will be attacked by the state of Israel and the pro-Israel pundits on several Western media outlets, and maybe even some Western governments might criticize Amnesty International, but Israel will do what it always does. It will just ignore Amnesty International because at the end of the day, it's an NGO. They have nothing in their hand that they can do. Actually, the United Nations itself, that prime international body, intergovernmental body that is supposedly upholds international law and international norms, stands unable completely and powerless to influence or deter Israeli aggression against Gaza or Lebanon or any of Israel's intransigence in the region, which includes the violation of a multitude of international laws, including international humanitarian law, including international human rights law, and as well basic international law and international principles like the state sovereignty, for example, and the right to self-determination. So Israel, unfortunately, enjoys full impunity because of U.S. support and the complicity of many European powers as well.
General Al-Shuroof, from a security perspective, how might Amnesty report impact Israel's strategic decisions?
Good afternoon to you.
Welcome,
and
sir.
to the viewers. The Amnesty International is an independent organization relative to the human rights, and it has a credibility throughout the whole world and the United Nations. Such organizations, when condemn Israel and cite in its report the continued human rights violation against Palestine by saying to the whole world that this country that respects democracy and human rights as is violating the human rights grossly. As a result, there are civilian casualties, and the whole world should shoulder the responsibility to move against the genocide and the suffering that practiced by the Israeli occupation that recently, in addition to the genocide, the starvation policy as a part of the genocide war for the Palestinian people. Therefore, this organization, as it has a credibility, is calling upon the whole world to move forward into achieving justice and to move it for the ceasefire and to put an end for the war against the Palestinian people.
Dr. Osman, Amnesty International report accusing Israel of committing the crime of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza is a grave allegation that Israel has consistently denied. Do you think Israel's dismissal of international reports strengthens or weakens its position?
Well, from a PR perspective and from a moral perspective, of course, it diminishes their credibility immensely and renders them as an incessant and systemic violator of international law and of human rights and of basic decency, to be honest. So from a moral standpoint and from a PR standpoint, yes, it does diminish their influence and it does make them look bad. On the other hand, from a realistic standpoint on the ground and from a political standpoint, unfortunately, them dismissing these reports does not have any consequences, because no one, unfortunately, is willing to hold Israel accountable. International law is applied by states. So if states are not willing to apply international law in order to punish, for example, Israeli war criminals condemned by the International Criminal Court or indicted by the International Criminal Court, then the law is rendered meaningless, unfortunately. So Israel, unfortunately, can afford dismissing and ignoring and even denying and insulting and diminishing reports that document its violations. You said allegations. These are, in my opinion, these are not allegations. These are proven facts.
What? I beg your pardon, sir. Can you please say this again?
I'm saying in the question you said allegations. These are not allegations. These are proven facts.
Proven facts. Yes, sir, they're proven facts. But at this point, Amnesty made this allegation, so it makes us feel all there's like the silence that the entire world is living globally. They started to speak up.
That's what the double standard driven international community deals with it and says allegations. Unfortunately, this is the fact. But I myself, as a human rights worker as well, with a person with a background in human rights, I am very well aware that what Israel is doing is in fact grave violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, beginning with the crime of genocide, which is the worst form of violation, because the crime of genocide, for people to understand, is the crime where you try to annihilate in part or in full an entire nation or population. This is what Israel is doing, and this is usually implemented through mass killings, through forced deportations and forced displacements, through the destruction of infrastructure, through the destruction of the cultural heritage, through the destruction of the food supply and depriving them of food. So this is a textbook case of genocide that for the first time in history is occurring and transpiring on air as we speak, unfortunately.
General Al-Shuroof, are such reports seen within Israel as a national security concern or as public relations issues, sir? How do they read what's happening?
Such reports is form a concern not just for the Israeli people but also the Israeli government that prove the reverse of its allegation during the war that respecting the human rights do not practice in aggression against civilians. Such a report, when reported domestically and internationally, might change the world public opinion as well as the inside Israel. That might have helped to change the world public opinion for Israel. And Israel, based on such a report and other reports, due to their practices are excluded and not in favor globally. That is not the only democratic state in the Middle East. By such an aggression, the whole world is looking at Israel as an aggressor against Palestinians, and the Lebanese do not respect the human rights, the international norms and charters, violate everything, only understand the language of destruction and demolition. Within only 1 year, killed more than 40,000 people and more than 100 wounded. Therefore, these martyrs and wounded by the Israeli forces, there is a globally condemnation that
okay, sir,
escalated.
Dr. Osman, because I have to wrap up this episode. Sir, how do you read such accusations resonate globally, sir, please?
Can you repeat the question, please? Hello?
Yes, Dr. Osman, how do such accusations resonate globally from your own perspective or from the global perspective, sir?
Well, of course it will resonate because it will further reinforce a fact that is now wide known by international public opinion. Most of the people of the world have rediscovered their consciousness towards the Palestinian cause. And everyone by now knows, everyone, of course, with a sound mind and with a clear heart, has seen with themselves, with their own eyes, how the Palestinian people are suffering. And
do you think, sir, it's going to leverage actions taking towards Israel as soon as possible?
Unfortunately not. No, it won't. It won't. Because at the end of the day, it's realpolitik. At the end of the day, what the interests of the United States dictate is the absolute superiority of the state of Israel in the region, and this is enshrined in United States law, actually. So they have an obligation to ensure their overall superiority in the Middle East. And if this entails them crushing the Palestinian cause and committing acts of aggression against sovereign states like Syria or Lebanon, for example, and annihilating a part of an entire population in Gaza by exterminating them and killing over 50,000 people. 50,000 people, mostly civilians, and this is definitely, this figure is an understatement. Probably the actual numbers are much higher. The Lancet report, a very well-reputed British medical academic journal, has said a few months back that the actual death toll in Gaza can actually exceed 186,000 people, and that because of the collapse of the health authorities in Gaza, we are unable to calculate or to find out what the actual numbers are. So if this is not a textbook case of genocide, I do not know what is. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, as long as the United States provides unconditional support to Israel, Israel will enjoy impunity.
Unfortunately, sir, and we hope, of course, the genocides and atrocities end as soon as possible. That was Major General Habis Al-Shuroof, Director of the Palestinian Institute for National Security Studies from Ramallah, and Dr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist from Cairo. Thank you very much for your informative knowledge and for your insights. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.